The Oedipus Complex, a battle of love and rivalry. Imagine a young boy, no older than 5, standing in the warm glow of the living room lamp. His mother is sitting on the couch, smiling at him with that same loving gaze she always has. His father, however, looms nearby, tall, strong, and dominant. And for some reason the boy feels something strange. A mix of admiration, jealousy, and a deep, unexplainable love toward his mother. He doesn't understand it, but deep inside, he wants to be the one she loves most. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, would say this boy is experiencing what he called the Oedipus Complex, a subconscious rivalry with his father for his mother's attention. Named after the tragic Greek hero Oedipus, who unknowingly killed his father and married his mother, this psychological phenomenon is said to emerge during the phallic stage of development, between the ages of 3 and 6. At this tender age, a child begins to realize gender differences, and more importantly, forms deep emotional attachments. A boy might become possessive of his mother, feeling a strange sense of competition with his father. He might try to interrupt their conversations, demand more attention, or even attempt to physically separate them. But the father is an imposing figure, a giant in the child's eyes. The boy starts feeling a growing fear of retaliation, a subconscious anxiety that Freud called castration anxiety, the terrifying thought that his father might punish him by taking away his masculinity. If the Oedipus complex is left unresolved, it could leave lasting scars. The boy may grow into a man with difficulties in relationships, clingy, overly attached, or constantly searching for maternal comfort in romantic partners. Some may even develop hostility toward male authority figures, always feeling like they're in competition. But when resolved, something remarkable happens. The boy identifies with his father instead of opposing him. He begins to imitate him, respect him, and learn from him, internalizing his morals and values. This is the foundation of the superego, the voice of conscience that will guide him through adulthood. And so, the boy who once saw his father as a rival slowly grows into a man who understands his place in the world. The battle for love subsides, replaced by admiration, understanding, and the quiet realization that his mother's love was never something to be won, but something that was always his. The Electra Complex, a daughter's silent war picture. A little girl standing by the doorway of her parents' bedroom, watching as her mother and father laugh together. Her father is warm, protective, and strong, a true hero in her eyes. Her mother? She is there too, but somehow, the girl feels a quiet, simmering resentment towards her. Deep in her subconscious, a thought begins to form. Why is she so special? Why does he love her more? This is the essence of the Electra Complex, a term coined by Carl Jung, inspired by the Greek myth of Electra, a woman who conspired to kill her mother to avenge her father. Freud believed this complex mirrors the Oedipus complex in boys, only in reverse. At around 3 to 6 years old, a little girl realizes something significant. Her father is different from her. Unlike her mother, he is powerful and admired. In her developing mind, she begins to see him as her ideal protector, someone she wants to be close to. This closeness can transform into a deep emotional attachment, possessiveness, or even jealousy. She might try to outshine her mother, seeking more of her father's attention, being extra affectionate with him, and subtly pushing her mother aside. If the mother scolds her, she may react with defiance, resentment, or even a desire to be better than her mother. Freud introduced a controversial idea called penis envy, arguing that girls subconsciously feel they are missing something that boys have. According to his theory, this realization creates resentment towards the mother, who is seen as the one who failed to give her this power. The girl instead turns toward her father, idealizing him as the stronger parent. As she grows older, however, The Electra Complex dissolves. A healthy resolution leads her to identify with her mother, understanding that she is not a rival, but a role model. She internalizes maternal traits, which later shape her own sense of femininity and relationships. But if left unresolved, a woman might carry lingering effects, seeking father figures in romantic relationships, struggling with authority, or harboring resentment towards other women. The complex fades, but its echoes remain. The little girl who once looked at her father with admiration eventually understands that love is not something to steal or fight for. It is something to be shared. The Napoleon Complex. Small stature, big ego. In a crowded room, a man walks in, short in height but towering in presence. He speaks loudly, takes up space, and carries himself like a giant among men. His confidence is overwhelming, his energy relentless. He demands respect, but beneath it all, is he compensating for something? This is the Napoleon Complex, named after Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor often described as an ambitious but short-tempered leader who overcompensated for his small stature with aggressive behavior. In reality, Napoleon was of average height for his time, but the myth persisted, fueling the belief that shorter men tend to overcompensate with dominance, ambition, or aggression. Psychologists describe this as heightened compensatory behavior, where a perceived physical disadvantage leads to an exaggerated need to prove oneself. A man with the Napoleon complex might speak louder than necessary, try to assert dominance in conversations, be quick to challenge authority, engage in excessive competition. This complex isn't limited to men. Women, too, may feel the need to overcompensate for their physical appearance in professional or social settings. A shorter woman might wear high heels constantly or develop an assertive, no-nonsense personality to demand attention. Though often joked about, the Napoleon complex is very real in psychology. It stems from deep-seated insecurities and a need to prove one's worth in a world that often favors the tall, the strong, and the imposing. Yet history shows that some of the most powerful figures, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King Jr., and even Napoleon himself, were not the tallest, but the most determined. The real lesson? Sometimes the smallest figures cast the largest shadows. The God complex. The man who thought he was above all. He enters the room, not like an ordinary man, but like a king surveying his kingdom. His eyes sweep over the people around him, not in curiosity, but in silent judgment. To him they are insignificant, mere background noise in the grand symphony of his life. When he speaks, there is no uncertainty, no hesitation. His words are absolute, delivered with a confidence so unshakable that even those who know better begin to doubt themselves. If you challenge him, he will laugh, not because he finds humor in your defiance, but because the idea that he could be wrong is, to him, ridiculous beyond comprehension. There are no equals in his world, only followers and fools. Somewhere along the way, something inside him broke, or perhaps something was built too high, too strong, too unyielding. Maybe he was a child who was always told he was special, that he was different from the others, that greatness ran through his veins. Maybe he spent years proving himself, achieving things that most could only dream of, until one day he stopped believing he was human at all. A person like this doesn't simply think he is smart. He believes he is the smartest. He doesn't just trust his instincts. He believes they are divine guidance. If the world disagrees with him, then the world must be wrong. And if people suffer because of his decisions, that's not his problem. That's their weakness. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't change his mind. After all, why would a god need to? There are many like him, leaders, scientists, surgeons, entrepreneurs, visionaries, people whose ambition and confidence have taken them to heights others could never reach. And yet, the higher they climb, the less they see of the ground beneath them. A doctor who dismisses a patient's pain because he knows better than they do. a CEO who pushes his employees to exhaustion because he alone understands the company's true potential, a ruler who silences dissent because his vision is the only one that matters. And what happens when he falls? For a man who has spent his life convinced of his own invincibility, defeat is impossible to accept. He will rewrite history, blaming others, twisting reality, refusing to acknowledge his failures. Because to admit he is wrong is to admit he is not a god after all. And that, more than anything, is something he will never do. The Cassandra Complex, the curse of knowing but never being believed. She stands at the edge of the crowd, her voice hoarse from shouting, her hands trembling from frustration. No one listens. No one ever listens. She has seen what is coming, felt it in her bones, read it in the signs, calculated it with precision. Disaster looms ahead, a tragedy that could be avoided if only they would heed her warning. But they don't. They never do. They smile politely, pat her on the shoulder, dismiss her concerns as paranoia, hysteria, or mere pessimism. And then, when the storm finally arrives, when the fire spreads, when everything she warned about comes to pass, they turn to her with wide, shocked eyes. Why didn't you say something? She wants to scream. She did. She always does. The Cassandra Complex is not just a psychological phenomenon. It is a curse, one that has haunted minds throughout history. Named after Cassandra, the tragic prophetess of Greek mythology, it describes those who see the truth before others do, who predict disaster, who warn of the inevitable, only to be ignored, mocked, or ridiculed. In the ancient myths, Cassandra was gifted with the power of prophecy by Apollo, but when she refused to love him, he cursed her so that no one would ever believe her warnings. She foresaw the fall of Troy, the betrayal, the bloodshed, but her people laughed in her face. It was only when the city burned that they realized she had been right all along. The Cassandra Complex is not a delusion. It is the torment of knowing something true but being powerless to make others see it. A scientist who predicts an environmental catastrophe but is labeled an alarmist. A woman who senses the danger in a relationship but is told she is overreacting. A whistleblower who uncovers corruption but is painted as a liar. It happens every day, in politics, in medicine, in relationships, in life. A Cassandra does not suffer from a lack of knowledge. She suffers from the world's refusal to listen. And yet she cannot stop, even as people roll their eyes at her warnings, even as they call her dramatic, irrational, unstable, even as she watches disaster unfold again and again, powerless to stop it, because she cannot unsee what she sees. She carries the weight of foresight, the agony of knowing that the future does not have to be this way, and the crushing despair of realizing that, no matter how loudly she speaks, the world has already decided not to hear her. He wakes up at noon, stretching lazily as the morning sun has long since passed. His apartment is cluttered, not with the signs of a working professional, but with video games, comic books, and the relics of childhood that most have long since abandoned. His friends are getting married, buying houses, starting families. He is still figuring things out. He doesn't understand why people rush into careers they hate, why they tie themselves down with responsibilities, why they seem so eager to trade joy for obligation. He refuses to follow them, and so he lingers in the limbo between youth and adulthood, never fully stepping into either world. The Peter Pan Complex, named after the boy who never grew up, is more than just immaturity. It is the deep-rooted fear of aging, responsibility, and commitment. It is the desperate clinging to youth, the refusal to accept the passage of time, the avoidance of anything that feels like real adulthood. At first glance, he is carefree, easygoing, the life of the party. But beneath the surface there is something fragile, something fearful. He jumps from job to job, avoiding anything too serious. He avoids long-term relationships, preferring short flings that demand little of him. He drowns himself in entertainment, in distractions, in anything that keeps reality at bay. The world tells him to grow up, to settle down, to take life seriously, but he doesn't want to. Maybe it's because adulthood to him has always looked like a prison, a dull gray world of taxes, obligations, and responsibilities, a world where dreams are replaced with routine, where laughter is exchanged for stress, where life feels more like a checklist than an adventure. And so, he refuses to enter it. But time does not stop for anyone. The friends he once played with now have families of their own. The places he once loved feel smaller, emptier. The thrill of his carefree existence fades, replaced by a gnawing loneliness, a quiet sense that something is missing. He is Peter Pan, stranded in Neverland, and one day he may realize, too late, that while he was so busy avoiding adulthood, he never truly lived at all. The Dorian Gray Complex, the obsession with eternal youth. The mirror doesn't lie. Every morning he stands before it, scrutinizing his reflection with ruthless precision. He runs his fingers over his skin, searching for the slightest imperfection, a new wrinkle, a faint crease near his mouth, a shadow beneath his eyes. His heart pounds at the thought. He can't let it happen. He won't let it happen. He spends hours perfecting his image, the creams, the serums, the treatments. They are not indulgences, they are necessities. The gym is not for health, but for preservation. Every strand of hair is meticulously styled, every detail of his wardrobe calculated. Because the world is not kind to those who lose their beauty. The Dorian Gray Complex, named after Oscar Wilde's infamous character, describes an obsessive, often pathological fear of aging and a desperate attachment to youthful appearance. Dorian Gray, a man who remained forever young while his hidden portrait bore the marks of time, serves as the ultimate symbol of vanity turned to madness. For someone like him, youth is not just a stage of life. It is identity, currency, power. The moment he begins to age, he fears he will lose everything: admiration, attraction, relevance. And so he fights it. He surrounds himself with younger people, clinging to their energy as if it might slow the ticking clock. He avoids mirrors on bad days, afraid of what he might see. He flirts with the idea of surgery, of anything that can hold back the inevitable. But time is cruel. It does not listen. It does not pause. It does not care. He sees the changes happening, so slowly at first that they are almost imperceptible. But then, suddenly, all at once. And as he struggles to hold on, he realizes the tragic truth. He has spent so long fearing the future that he never truly lived in the present. And in the end, the mirror always wins. The Stockholm Syndrome complex, loving the hand that holds the chains. The first time he struck her, it was a mistake. At least that's what he told her. His voice was soft, apologetic, filled with regret. He kissed her bruises, whispered promises, told her it would never happen again. She believed him. The second time, he didn't apologize as much. The third time, he didn't apologize at all. And yet, she stayed. Not because she was weak, not because she was stupid, but because somewhere along the way her mind had rewritten the story. She had begun to believe that he wasn't the villain, but the only one who truly understood her. This is Stockholm Syndrome, the strange, terrifying phenomenon where victims form emotional bonds with their captors, their abusers, their tormentors. Named after a bank robbery in Sweden in 1973, where hostages began defending their captors, it is a psychological paradox, the mind's desperate attempt to survive by reshaping reality. To outsiders, it makes no sense. Why doesn't she leave? Why does she defend him? Why does she love him? But inside her mind, the answer is simple. because he is the only one who can save her from himself. He is cruel, but he also provides comfort. He is violent, but he is also the one who wipes away her tears. He is the storm and the shelter all at once. The more isolated she becomes, the deeper the bond grows. And soon she cannot imagine a world without him, not because she doesn't want to, but because he has become her world. Some escape, some never do, but all of them, at some point, ask the same haunting question. When did I stop seeing him as a monster and start seeing him as my only hope? The Icarus Complex, the fearless climb towards self-destruction. The warning was clear. Do not fly too close to the sun. But he didn't listen. He never does. He craves the thrill of risk, the intoxicating rush of defiance. He is brilliant, reckless, driven by ambition so fierce that it blinds him. He wants to achieve more, to reach higher, to surpass the limits that others accept. People admire him. They call him a visionary, a genius, a force of nature. But they do not see what he refuses to admit to himself. He is not climbing toward greatness. He is racing toward his own destruction. The Icarus Complex is the tragedy of those who push themselves beyond the brink, who refuse to slow down, who become so obsessed with their own power that they ignore the warning signs. They are the workaholics, the daredevils, the visionaries who burn too bright, too fast, and then collapse under the weight of their own intensity. He builds an empire but never stops to rest. He chases perfection, but never allows himself to enjoy success. He reaches the heights he always dreamed of, but finds only exhaustion, emptiness, and isolation. Like Icarus, the boy who soared too high and fell, he learns, too late, that his wings were never indestructible. And when he finally crashes, when the empire crumbles, when the exhaustion overtakes him, he looks back and realizes the fall was always inevitable. Each of these complexes tells a different story, but at their core, they share a common truth. The mind is both a sanctuary and a battleground. Some people fight against time, some fight against love, some fight against themselves, and some never stop fighting at all.